Poland knows that it needs to be ready for anything. The Ukraine war has taught it that, especially now that Russia's aerial assaults against Ukraine are getting so close that they're starting to impact Poland. No strikes have occurred yet, but Poland has been forced to scramble their jets several times thanks to Russia's drones and missiles. The Polish borders need to be protected, and the US may be on the verge of ensuring that happens. US troops may soon mass at the Polish border, and it's not just the eastern flank those troops will protect. Kaliningrad, which is more to Poland's north, is also on high alert due to US troops potentially amassing. On September 3rd, US President Donald Trump welcomed the Polish President Karol Nawrocki to the White House for a sit-down meeting in front of the world's press. The meeting was immediately remarkable for a simple fact. Trump spoke to Nawrocki instead of Poland's prime minister. In its reporting on the meeting, Reuters suggests that Trump may have made this choice because he favors Nawrocki over Tusk. The former is a conservative nationalist whose political views more closely align with Trump's than those of the more centrist Tusk. The pomp and circumstance surrounding the meeting certainly suggests that Trump has a good relationship with Poland's president. Nawrocki was greeted at the White House with a flyover conducted by US military pilots flying F-16s. There was a touch of symbolism in this flyover, Reuters notes. The US pilots flew in a special missing man formation to commemorate the life of a Polish F-16 pilot who crashed his jet while preparing for an air show in late August. After the show was over, the two retired to speak in private about several aspects of the US-Poland relationship. When they emerged, the pair spoke to the assembled press, which was when Donald Trump was asked a big question. Newsweek says that a reporter asked him if the US will maintain its troops in Poland or withdraw them. "Yeah, I think so," Trump responded as a confirmation that the US soldiers in Poland aren't going anywhere before he joked, "Do you know something I don't?" Trump added that the US is very happy with its relationship with Poland before he dropped what could be a major bombshell. "If anything, we'll put more there if they want," Trump declared. "They've long wanted to have a larger presence," Trump added before reiterating that the current US troops stationed in Poland will be staying where they are. Nawrocki followed up on the existing deployment, stating, "American soldiers have become part of our society. There are almost 10,000 of them. This is a signal to the Russian Federation." While obviously a message to Vladimir Putin that Poland takes the issue of border security seriously, this statement could also have been a subtle ploy to convince Trump to send more. 10,000 is a lot, Nawrocki seems to be saying. But with US forces now so ingrained in Poland, more will always be better. That seems to be confirmed by more joking comments made by Nawrocki. "This is the first time in Polish history that the Poles are happy that we have foreign soldiers in Poland," Nawrocki said before claiming that "we are secure when US soldiers are in Poland." Yet another signal to Trump. More will be better. Now, there's an obvious caveat to this story that you've likely already noticed. Though Trump and Nawrocki both seem to be implying that they would be happy to see more US troops enter Poland, neither has offered an official confirmation. Trump says that the US would be willing if Poland wants more soldiers, and Nawrocki implies heavily that Poland does indeed want more. However, there is no formal agreement here, no statement that says more than the current deployment of US troops will be heading to Poland's border regions, at least not yet. Implication is so often the precursor to action, and the fact that both of these leaders are talking about more US troops heading to Poland publicly is a big sign that conversations have taken place behind the scenes to that effect. If it is indeed true that Trump is preparing to send more US troops into Poland, that's huge news. Why? Poland faces massive threats on both its eastern and northern flanks. The latter of these flanks borders Kaliningrad, and the news of a potential US troop deployment in Poland will have Russian forces stationed in that exclave worried. However, we'll get back to that point in a moment. For now, the more pressing concern, at least from the Polish perspective, is the country's eastern flank. Poland has been seeking assurances from its NATO allies for that eastern flank for a long time. The country borders both Ukraine and Belarus on its eastern side, and one of those nations already represents a clear and obvious threat. Belarus is such a staunch ally of Russia that Putin was able to use the country as a launching pad for his Ukraine invasion back in 2022. Even now, over 3 years later, Belarus is getting stronger thanks to its relationship with Russia. On August 1st, CNN reported that Putin has confirmed that Russia's new hypersonic missile, which can travel at least 10 times the speed of sound, has entered production, and that at least some of those missiles will be deployed in Belarus. Poland is worried about what Belarus being so cozy with Russia means for the future, and it should be. After all, if Russia somehow manages to defeat Ukraine, Putin may turn his attention to other former Soviet nations that he'd like to welcome back into the Russian Federation. Poland is one of those nations, along with being a NATO member, making it a doubly attractive target for Putin. If Russia's leader intends to start a war beyond Ukraine, Poland will be right on the front line of the NATO defense. Which brings us back to Poland's eastern flank. Poland has been independently strengthening the border it shares with Belarus and calling on its allies to help with this reinforcement for several years. Newsweek points out that Poland's border with Ukraine also isn't the safest in the world. Ukraine itself isn't a threat, however, Russia's constant aerial strikes against Ukraine are. Poland borders multiple Ukrainian regions that have experienced repeated Russian missile and drone attacks over the past 3.5 years. Other NATO allies have previously mobilized air policing and intercepts in response to major Russian aerial campaigns, Newsweek notes. Even on the night that Nawrocki visited the White House, Poland was forced to ready its fighter jets and place its air defense systems on high alert as yet another long-range Russian strike against Ukraine came perilously close to the Polish border. Poland needs to protect its eastern flank. It's relying on its NATO allies, especially the United States, to help it to do that. Poland has definitely earned the extra help. In a January article, it said that over 75,000 Polish military and civilian personnel have served as part of NATO missions during the country's 25-year membership in the organization. Poland has also contributed financially to 150 major infrastructure projects carried out as part of the NATO Security Investment Program, and another 74 projects were underway at the beginning of 2025. We also can't ignore the fact that Poland has routinely exceeded the NATO recommendation to spend at least 2% of its gross domestic product, or GDP, on defense long before other NATO members were prompted to do the same, thanks to Trump's issues with their defense spending. According to Reuters, in April, Poland had plans to spend 5% of its GDP on defense in 2026, though that has since been revised down to 4.8%. Still, it's a substantial amount that, along with Poland's other NATO commitments, marks the country out as one of the most important military powers in the collective defense organization. Poland is also taking independent action to reinforce its eastern border. The Jamestown Foundation reports that it's in the process of building fortifications that it hopes to have ready by 2028. These fortifications will be an important part of what Poland is dubbing the Eastern Shield, and Poland is going to pour $2.55 billion into these border defenses over the next few years. Poland is also pushing for NATO, more specifically the US, to entrust it with nuclear weapons. According to The Loop, the country is actively pushing to become part of NATO's nuclear sharing program, which would see it play host to nuclear missiles from at least one of the 3 NATO nations that have them, the US, France, and the UK. The Loop explains why. Russia's war in Ukraine has shifted Poland's strategic thinking. The possibility of Russia using nuclear coercion or deploying tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus has intensified Warsaw's security concerns. Indeed, experts close to the Kremlin threaten that Poland might become a nuclear attack target, the outlet says. Now that it's a target, Poland is arguing, the country should be considered as a first line of defense against Russia, as well as a potential launching pad for counter-offensives up to and including the launch of nuclear weapons, should a future war go that far. All of this brings us back to Trump's suggestion that the US will be willing to send more of its troops to Poland. Though seemingly a flippant remark, made as a response to an impromptu question, Poland will see the arrival of these troops as a way to further strengthen the defenses it's already building. Border fortifications are already being erected. Poland is spending more on its military in terms of GDP than any other NATO member. And the threat presented by Belarus, what's happening in Ukraine, and as we'll get to soon, Kaliningrad, justify the US sending more soldiers. It all comes down to a really simple equation. More US soldiers in Poland equals a lower likelihood of a Russian invasion. But there may be something more to all of this. If Poland can play its cards right, it could use the arrival of more US troops as leverage to negotiate the revival of US involvement in a program that will be of great use to Poland. The 3 Cs Initiative, or 3SI. According to the German Marshall Fund of the United States, GMFUS, Nawrocki's positioning himself as Trump's main ideological ally inside Poland may have the ulterior motive of strengthening the 3SI. According to the official 3Cs Initiative website, the 3SI is a program designed to improve the connectivity of 13 European Union member states that are located between the Baltic, Black, and Adriatic Seas. The energy, transport, and digital infrastructure sectors of the 13 involved countries are strengthened by the 3SI, which means that the program has another, unstated aim. The more successful the 3SI becomes, the less of an influence Russia can have in the 3 Cs that it covers, or the nations that rely on those seas for connectivity. GMFUS says that the US could certainly benefit from investing in the program again. Renewed US involvement in the 3SI would be consistent with Trump's America First agenda, the organization says. Financing regional interconnectivity and pipeline infrastructure projects will provide opportunities for selling more American energy and technology in Central and Eastern Europe. In other words, the US could make a profit while Poland and the other 3SI nations reinforce control over the seas that have suffered from extensive Russian influence in the past. Perhaps the 3SI was raised in the private conversation between Trump and Nawrocki. We don't know for sure. However, the suggestion that the US might send more troops to Poland certainly suggests the kind of friendly relationship that would allow Nawrocki to raise the question. If not now, then 3SI may be something on which Poland and the US cooperate in the future. However, we have to come back to a point we made earlier in the video. Nothing is official yet. And there's an element of internal political strife related to this meeting that we've only vaguely touched on so far. As Reuters notes, Trump seems to favor Nawrocki over Tusk, so much so that Trump extended the invitation to the White House mere days after Nawrocki was sworn in as Poland's new president. Trump has also intervened to have Nawrocki take part in a telephone call regarding the Ukraine war, booting Tusk from that call in the process. This favoritism stems in large part from Nawrocki having similar political leanings to Trump. However, Reuters also notes that for the US to send more troops to Poland or to provide any of the other security guarantees the nation seeks from the US and its NATO allies, Trump will be looking to get a little something in return. Experts say Trump will be looking for Warsaw to buy even more US weapons for its own use and to send to Ukraine, Reuters reports. The US is already pushing this agenda. Poland is already a massive investor in US weapons, with Defense News reporting in February that the country had offered to dedicate a large portion of its 2025 $47.1 billion military budget to US weapons. Poland has also proposed a joint ammunition program, and the US has extended Poland a $4 billion line of credit to help it with future weapons purchases. All signs point to Trump wanting Poland to become more deeply entrenched in its relationship with the US, which lends a different angle to the US president's mention of sending more troops to Poland. Trump knows Poland wants those US troops. By providing them while leaning on Nawrocki, Trump may be able to secure yet more Polish investment into American-made weapons. Politics aside, there is one region that will be especially concerned about the potential strengthening of Poland's border forces. It's the region we mentioned earlier in the video, Kaliningrad. The Russian exclave is a problem not just for Poland, but for all of Europe. Kaliningrad occupies a unique position in Europe, as it's part of the Russian Federation, but it's separated from the Russian mainland. Instead, it's sandwiched between Poland and Lithuania, and Russia has long taken advantage of this geographical positioning to use Kaliningrad as a constant source of threat against the collective West. Military drills on both sides of Kaliningrad's border with Poland stir worries, as was the case in August. That month, it was Poland creating the concern for Russia as it conducted a series of aerial drills that brought it to within 25 miles of the border. The fact that those drills were happening at all demonstrates how concerned Poland is about Kaliningrad, and it has every right to be. In June, AA reported on comments made by Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, in which he implied that Poland and Germany need to come up with a plan to counter the threat posed by the Iskander-M ballistic missiles Russia stations in Kaliningrad. "We are good allies, and we must build armed forces that will not scare anyone but deter Putin," Sikorski said. "As long as Germany is in NATO and the EU, I am more afraid of German hesitation in the matter of armament than of the German army." In other words, Poland is looking to its NATO and European allies to get their collective acts together when it comes to Kaliningrad. ABC digs deeper into Poland's Kaliningrad problem. It points out that the exclave has remained one of Russia's most important economic, shipping and military hubs, despite Kaliningrad being isolated from the mainland. When Russia invaded Ukraine, it placed Poland on high alert. After all, as mentioned earlier, Russia happily used Belarus to provide itself with a launching pad for the Ukraine invasion. If Putin turns his eye toward taking on NATO, Poland believes that it may see fronts develop both near its border with Belarus and on the Kaliningrad border. If Putin has conquered Ukraine by the time that a war against NATO happens, that will make a third dangerous country that borders Poland. For Poland, taking care of the Kaliningrad problem mitigates the threat that Russia poses. Of course, Poland can't just invade Kaliningrad. Its army is certainly powerful enough to defeat the forces stationed in Kaliningrad, even if those forces have access to ballistic missiles. But an attack on Kaliningrad amounts to an attack on Russia. Putin would happily use a show of force by Poland to declare war on the country. He could even argue that NATO's Article 5, which duty binds every NATO member to come to the defense of any other member that's attacked on its sovereign soil, wouldn't apply. Poland attacked Russia, Putin could say, so NATO needs to stay out of the fight. With a direct attack being impossible, Poland has to do what it's already doing, strengthen its border defenses as much as it can. And that brings us back to the US and the troops that it might be about to deploy. The good news for Poland is that Kaliningrad seems to be on at least a handful of important mines in the US. One of those mines belongs to the US Army Europe and Africa Commander General Chris Donahue, who said in July that NATO forces will be able to take control over Kaliningrad in a time frame that is unheard of. Whether that threat is accurate or not, the point is that Russia's exclave is being considered a threat by more than just Poland. If Donahue is thinking about how NATO would take territory, there's a possibility that the US is looking into deploying more troops to Poland as a means of dissuading Putin from using Kaliningrad to spark a war against Poland or the rest of European NATO. Poland may also be looking to strengthen its border forces near Kaliningrad because some see the exclave as a Russian weak point. As mentioned, it's not a large piece of territory. The exclave encompasses just 5,840 square miles, making it an easy target for NATO aircraft, as well as vulnerable to a ground invasion from neighboring Poland and Lithuania. Again, more US troops arriving in Poland would send a message to Putin. It would show Russia's leader that not only is Poland strengthening its borders, but it's building a stronger force, incorporating a key NATO ally that has already said Kaliningrad would be an easy territory to take. All of these are reasons why Kaliningrad will be on high alert thanks to Trump and Nawrocki's statements. More US troops may not be officially heading to Poland to join the 10,000 already stationed there, but the fact that the subject is even a topic of conversation, and one that Trump seems happy to entertain, suggests that there's a possibility this could happen. If it does, Kaliningrad could be the border region that is Poland's key focus as it develops both its offensive and defensive postures against Putin. Should fighting break out in Kaliningrad, Ukraine may be able to help. It's just upgraded one of its strongest long-range drones, making it more of a threat to Russia than ever before. Ukraine's round loaf is Putin's worst nightmare, and nowhere in Russia, including Kaliningrad, is safe from its wrath. Find out more in our video and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering the latest developments in Poland and Kaliningrad. And thank you for watching.